Okay, this is the P4 paper from June 2023. It's the first question, question number 1, and as we can see as I scroll down, it's a binomial expansion question. Let's have a look at part A then, which says, can we expand this for the first 4 terms? So let's have a look at this. What I want to use is the binomial expansion 1 plus x to the n, but I can see that my first term isn't 1 there, so I will just need to make an adaptation before we get going with the question. Let's have a look at part A then. So part A, we have a quarter minus half x all to the power of minus 3 over 2, and I'm going to take that quarter out. So if I take a quarter out, just be careful, it's not a quarter that I'm taking out, it's a quarter to the power of minus 3 over 2. But in effect, to take that quarter out, I'm multiplying everything inside by 4. So if I multiply that by 4, I get 1. And if I multiply half x by 4, I get 1 minus 2x, all to the power of minus 3 over 2. So I'm going to be expanding that. A quarter to the power of minus 3 over 2, just do it on the calculator. That works out to be 8. Lots of 1 minus 2x. Keep the square bracket to the power of minus 3 over 2. And now I can focus on this being an expansion I can do. The formula that we're looking for in the formula booklet is 1 plus x to the n is... Now, I would very strongly suggest that you learn this formula and you learn the way that it multiplies out. So, for example, here it's n minus 1, x squared over 2 factorial. Then it's n minus 1, n minus 2, and so on. X cubed over 3 factorial plus, and so on and so on and so on. And here, obviously, my n is going to be minus 3 over 2, and the x part of this is is whatever I'm adding on to 1. So in this case is minus 2x that I'm adding on to 1. So if I'm now going to apply that, excuse me, I'm going to get... that 1 minus 2x to the minus 3 over 2 is 1 plus nx then is going to be minus 3 over 2 minus 2x. n minus 1, well, you should get used to these. Minus 3 over 2, and then taking 1 away from minus 3 over 2 is minus 5 over 2. It's minus 2x squared this time over 2 factorial. And then we're just following that pattern through. So minus 3 over 2, minus 5 over 2, minus 7 over 2. Write those in. That's taking 1 off each time. And then minus 2x cubed this time, all over 3 factorial plus ... And then it's entirely up to you how you do it. Some of my students just, they realize that it's going to be 1, it's going to be an x, it's going to be an x squared, so they almost put those things in and then worry about the constants. I don't mind how you do it. You've just hopefully already got a method sorted out for being accurate. What you should have got then is 3x from this bit, 15 over 2 x squared from this bit, and 35 over 2 x cubed. Plus ... but we're not going any further. And remember then, we wanted 8 lots of that. So putting in 8 lots of all of that. 15 over 2 x squared, 35 over 2 x cubed, and so on and so on. Then actually gives us 8. It gives us 24x. 60x squared and 140 x cubed. So hopefully you found that relatively straightforward. You've got to do lots of practice of these ones. We know what we're going to get coming up in the question. Part B, well, I say we know what we'll get coming up. This is quite an unusual question, this one. It gives us that information there and then says, can we work out what the value of n is? You just got to absolutely focus on the fact that we've got the same thing inside all of these brackets. So if we've got the same thing inside of all these brackets, we're actually saying x to the n times x to the minus 3 over 2 is equal to x to the half. What's that? Well, then that's just adding powers. That's just our basic knowledge that we have of when you multiply powers, multiply these things together, you add the powers together. Let's show the examiner that I understand what's going on. It's only worth 1 mark, so you don't need to necessarily show any working out for it. So for part B here, let's at least write out the question. Quarter minus half x to the n times a quarter minus half x to the minus 3 over 2 works out to be equal to a quarter minus half x to the half. What we're then going to get is that n minus 3 over 2 must equal to a half. Okay, the powers work out like that, which means that n works out to be equal to 2. Okay, why have they asked me that? Then because for the last part, they've actually said, okay, now let's see if we can find out what that is. So 1 quarter minus a half x all to the power of a half then is going to be, because of what we've just worked out, quarter minus a half x squared, all multiplied by our first part, and our first part was 8 plus 24x, 60x squared, and 140 x cubed here. So now if I can just multiply this thing out and then multiply it out to work out what we're going to have, we only want 3 terms of it. So a quarter times a half squared is a minus b squared. If you want to do it as actually doing a minus b, and working them all out like that, I've got absolutely no problem with that. If you happen to know that a minus b all squared is a squared minus 2ab plus b squared, saves you a little bit of time. That's what I'm going to do. I think that's a 16th. It's minus a quarter x, and it's plus a quarter x squared. It's only saved me a second or two, but I guess it all adds up in the end. That multiplied by my answer to part A, 140x cubed there. And now when I'm multiplying this out, we only want the first 3 terms. So if we only want the first 3 terms, only up to x squared, I'm actually going to do a 16th times those 3, and then I'm going to do x times those 2. No point in going any further. X times x squared and x times x cubed, we won't be using those ones. And then finally just 8 times a quarter x squared. I'll actually do that now, but that's what I'm going to do to work out these terms. So that works out to be a half minus 2x plus 2x squared. And then we've got, and I'm not cancelling anything down at the moment, I'll do it all in a second. I've got 24 over 16x. I've got 6x squared, and then the last one, I've got 60 over 16 x squared. And I was focusing on just making sure I was, doing all those things without worrying about cancelling anything down. But now I can look at this and tidy it all up. I've got my half. If I collect together all the x's, I've got minus a half x. And if I collect together all the x squareds, I've got minus a quarter x squared. So that part C isn't too unusual, but part B was, and that's the whole benefit of obviously looking at past paper questions before you go into an exam. Hopefully that all makes sense to you.